We did it again.
Yeah.
We found the button. We are joined today with Gina again. Hi, Gina. So we got an email question sent to us by an anonymous person. We'll leave them anonymous. And she was asking about the genetics for Splash, Mottled, and Ermine. So I thought, well, who better than Gina Rather to explain that to us? So here you are again.
Thank you. How do you?
I feel like we
Now,
I feel like we talked about Americanas not too long ago, but maybe it has been a while.
It has been a minute.
Yeah.
A year almost, maybe.
When you talk about chickens all day, every day, time flies, I guess.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Right. But I'm Deep Rather from Rather Farms in Columbia, Tennessee. We raise Splash Americana along with Rhode Island Red, Dark Brown Leghorn, I am Shimani, Black Copper Marron, Silver Marron. And I feel like I'm forgetting something, and some various sex link hybrids for the local folks that like their sex links. Yeah, and I have a passion for chicken color genetics and showing my birds and experimenting with different colors. And I'm having a blast with a couple of different projects right now. But Splash Americana is one of my favorite breeds. So when Jennifer asked me to talk about Americanas, I was more than happy to do so.
Well, we're going to ask you all kinds of dumb questions because we really don't know very much except for what you told us last time. So I don't know anything about these genetics except maybe a little bit of the mottled. But
Let's dig.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So what we got here?
All right. This is a Splash Americana bullet. This picture was from the Dixie Classic in Knoxville last December. She took reserve champion AOSB. A lot of times when people walk by and casually look at the Splash Americana, they say, oh, is that Ermine? Because they hear about Ermine, and the image of an Ermine kind of sticks in people's heads because they are a remarkably colored bird. The Splash, however, is genetically very different than an Ermine. They're both essentially blackbirds, built on extended black at the locus. So you take a black bird and you add 2 copies of the blue gene to get to Splash. So 1 copy of blue will turn a black bird, dilute it to blue, and the standard for blue, according to the American Poultry Association, says that a good quality blue will also have a darker edge or darker lacing to the feathers in the majority of the body. Females typically all over. The males, you won't see the lacing so much except on the breast, because males have sexually dimorphic plumage. So their head, their backs, their tails are almost so dark that it is all extremely dark blue and kind of hides that lacing. But on a good Splash, you should be able to see that little edge of even darker blue around the solid blue feathers. Splash feathers are allowed to be hardy colored, I'll call it. You can have a feather that is half blue and half completely diluted out to white, and that's acceptable. Whereas an Ermine, their standard, the ideal Ermine would have a mixture of completely solid black feathers, completely solid white feathers. And so the difference is in the detail. When you're looking at these birds, you want to look at them on an individual feather basis. Your model is going to have a white tip on the very ends of each feather, is a good mottled. So,
can I ask you a question about this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so you said it's a black base with 2 copies of blue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if 1 copy of blue gives it a blue overall color, would this kind of be like white leakage all over?
I guess you could flip it around and think of it as leakage. Not true leakage in the sense that we usually use that word, but in an abstract way, yes. So the black feather essentially gets completely diluted to white in a lot of areas when you have two copies of blue.
Okay. You want to do the next slide?
So this is a Splash Americana male, and you can see on his tail feathers, he has some of those party colored feathers I was talking about. You've got streaks of blue, and you've got a majority of white on a lot of them. You've got a majority of blue and some streaks of white. And true to the sexually dimorphic plumage, you have a darker head, you have a darker saddle, you have a darker tail, and the top of the wings, the wing bows, are darker colored as well. And so you see that in the blue and splash birds.
Do you breed splash to get more splash?
Yes. Splash to splash will produce splash 100% of the time.
But does it produce more splash? I mean, summertime's approaching, and I think about going swimming sometimes. So I'm just wondering, is splash and splash is more splash?
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my brain around the genetics. So can it get so washed out that you end up with almost a white bird?
That's a great question. So for a long time, that was the advice that was given to splash breeders, is if you continue to breed splash to splash, eventually your birds will get lighter and lighter. Problem with that is that the people that was happening to aren't paying attention to the melanizers. So I mentioned that this is genetically a black bird, but to get a solid black bird requires more than just the extended black alleles at the E locus. You also need melanotic gene, maybe even some recessive black melanizers that don't have a formal name. A black bird, any black bird, will want to have that leakage that you were talking about. We usually see the leakage most commonly in the hackle, in the wing bows, and sometimes in the saddle, especially on males. Those extra melanizers are what is needed to keep those black areas black. And so on top of that, the pattern gene is what is responsible for pushing, especially in a blue, that eumelanin to the edge of the feather and create that lacing. So you need to keep the melanotic gene in your breeding, and you need to keep the pattern gene in that breeding. You need to select your splash breeders. So you are breeding the ones that are most strongly melanized. So I can use a lighter blue splash in my breeding program, but I want to be careful to breed her to an exceptionally well melanized male like this guy right here, who's very dark blue. I wouldn't want to breed her to a splash male who is the pale blue or almost white, because then I've already lost my melanizers in her. Even if she has exceptionally nice type, I'm going to pair her to something with the melanizers that I need, so I don't get a lighter and lighter bird.
So with doing this, you really got to pay attention to not only the desired traits, but some that may be considered not so much desired, but you've got to be able to combine them to get what you want as far as the coloring goes, to keep that part of it intact.
Yeah. And that's with any breed. You're going to be balancing your type with your color. And type is always going to be most important. But understanding that you need those melanizers every generation will keep you from washing your splash out.
Got it.
All right. This is another little pullet. And this picture shows her lacing in her saddle, in her shoulders, there on the edge of her breast, at the base of her neck really well. You can see some of her darker lacing there in her tail too. she was a pretty nice example for our show today, so I stuck her in here. But that lacing is key in good blues and therefore good splash. And the party colored feathers again. You see a white feather, that second feather down in her tail is mostly white, and it's got just a splash of blue there in the shaft. And there's a few feathers down. It's kind of the same way. So identifying splash is pretty easy when you look at the individual feathers.
All right, so I have a test question. Let's say you have a hen that is solid blue, and she has the slate legs. And then you have a rooster that is blue from like the breast down and has like fiery orange and yellows in their hackle feathers and a black head. How is it possible to get it to where you have a solid blue rooster as well through generations of selective coloring and whatnot? Or is the rooster's always going to have a different hackle?
So you're talking about different locuses here. So if you had a solid blue hen with no color in her house, she's probably going to be built on extended black. Your rooster with his blue breast and his red hackle is probably going to be basically a black-breasted red with a blue dilution, which causes him to be a blue-breasted red. His wing bay is probably going to be red or gold, I'm guessing. So where you see his secondaries when he's standing at rest, your wing bay is?
Not off the top of my head, no.
It's probably red. So he's going to be either a brown, which is the genetic shorthand EB. He's going to be a wild type, genetic shorthand E+, or he's going to be a Wheaton. Probably not a Wheaton. Did you say he has slate leg?
Yes, they both do.
He could be a Wheaton with slate legs, but probably not. I'd have to see him. Bred to her, if she is homozygous for extended black, you could get a solid blue bird. Or you could even get a bird that is flash. So
it's going to be like a box of chocolates, essentially, is what you're saying.
It is kind of, yeah. Most with blue, because you've got so many options. They can make some pretty babies.
Yeah.
All right. This is an Ermine. This is Becky Pelton. Becky Pelton created the Ermine variety of Americana. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Ermine, their distinction is they should have wholly black and wholly white feathers. The ideal Ermine does not have feathers that are black with white in them or white with black on them. Each feather is a whole color. And they are true black. They should be built on extended black. But the reason that they have this color is because it's a single copy of the dominant white gene. And the dominant white gene, when there is only one copy, allows for leaky holes. So there's this leakage word again. It's the same gene that is responsible for the zombies that I make. But Ermine has a much stronger expression. It has a lot more holes. Check keeping in the back now. That's hungry little Cornish.
I was going to say, sometimes you want to be like, hey, you're interrupting me. Quit. I'm trying to do something earlier.
Like, look, your feeder is full. Your water is clean. So anyway, where was I? So yes, the Ermine. in the dominant white. So one copy of dominant white makes this pattern, and Ermine is different than the dominant white that comes from like the Leghorn or Rhode Island white that I use in my zombies. They generally only have a few black spots. The Ermine is closer to 50-50. Don't remember off the top of my head what their standard currently calls for. It may be 60-40. So don't kill me. But there may be modifiers, and it may be a completely different allele at the dominant white locust entirely. I don't think anybody is really sure. There are some people that believe strongly one way or the other. There is no question that there is something different about the gene that the Ermine has as opposed to a paint silky or a heterozygote, any other heterozygote white breed.
So is each feather a color, or does it looks like it has black tip? Is that right?
Nope. So what you're seeing that looks like a black tip is being overlaid by a fully white feather. And so again, this is why it's important to inspect individual feathers. You would be able to lift that white feather up and see that that black underneath is an entirely white feather all the way down to the bottom of the shaft.
All right. So if somebody mixed an Ermine and a splash, what happens?
You would put blue Ermine. So that is a genetically black bird that we're looking at. And Splash has 2 copies of blue. So they're going to pass 1 copy of blue every time. And black plus 1 copy of blue equals a blue bird. Layer dominant white on top of that, and you have just some holes where the blue feathers will poke through. So you could easily do a blue Ermine that way.
Interesting.
Just make them camouflage.
It's an Ermine cockerel, again, of Becky Pelton's. And you can see maybe a little bit better on this guy's breast feathers and in his tail, the wholly black versus wholly white feathers. And, you know, as opposed to the Splash, I talked about how they're darker in the head, in the saddle, and in the tail, and in the wing bow, or in the wing bay, or wing bow, rather, the top of the wing, in the shoulders. And this guy has pretty even color throughout. And that's kind of a hallmark of Splash for the Ermine Americana.
Okay. Ermine.
Last one, Becky's, yep. And again, this girl has the fully black feathers in her tail, fully white feathers in her tail. She's a beautiful little girl. Oh, I think there's one more even better picture. That I had to fit these to that one. She's so pretty.
She looks like an owl.
I believe the photography of Lee Edwards.
She is pretty.
I said, if you want framed in your house, then you're crazy. All right. And then it's a model. So mottled is a white tip on the end of a colored feather, and it doesn't always have to be black. So in the case of, let's say, a speckled Sussex, you're going to have red and black with a white tip. This particular example is a mottled Brahma from Bissonnet Acres, and you can see the white tips on her feathers.
Okay, so now we have a black base with white wingtip.
Yep, white tips everywhere. And the curious thing about mottled is that it tends to be progressive. So the older the bird, the more white that they get. Which I understand makes it extremely difficult to show mottled hens and cocks. Because the mottled pattern kind of calls for just the tips of the feathers to be white, maybe. I don't raise any mottled, but I have heard the complaints. That's a terrible word. Heard concerns of mottled breeders and exhibitors.
That would be That would be a bird that you'd have to hang on to for a while to see if it got where it needed to be.
So in quail, they have a progressive pied. So the older it gets, the whiter it gets.
Sounds similar, yeah.
Okay.
Where is the white, the pied?
It just comes up anywhere, and as the bird gets older, it just turns more and more white.
Is it a whole feather white, a partial feather white?
No, I
Never
don't know.
looked that closely.
I don't know. I don't have them.
Yeah, that's tough. We tried to talk about breeder variety. Don't even read.
Yeah, I don't have them. But now, well, let's finish talking about what they look like, and then we'll get into the genetic part of it.
Yeah. Again, you see the white tips on these feathers. Mottled seems to have whiter heads than anywhere on the rest of the body, but you have more feathers and a greater concentration on the head. And so if every single feather is tipped in white and you have tons of feathers all packed together in one area, it is going to look a little bit more white in the head. So kind of make. Yeah, it's a young bird, obviously, and she is just coming in with her adult plumage, and so she has very huge white spots, but she probably looked very similar to the chick that was emailed to you. All right, this girl, she's very pretty. And again, just the white tips on the feathers.
All right, that's all of them. That's all the pictures. So the question that was presented to us was somebody who thought that they had ermine, and when they hatch the eggs, they see a mottled chick. So can you explain kind of the genetics there?
So mottled is a recessive gene, and recessive genes can hide for generations until that recessive gene carrier meet another carrier of that same recessive gene. A recessive has to exist in both copies, so become homozygous in order for it to express its trait. So if the breeder that she got her birds from, it's possible that that breeder could be, breeding that line and have a very diverse, genetically speaking, flock, and have never experienced that until, you have some sort of mating that brings. She could have started 10 years ago with one bird that was a carrier and, 10 other birds and 10 hens, one hen that was a carrier, right? And 10 other birds in her flock that did not carry it. And it isn't until that one carrier's offspring somewhere down the line runs into and gets mated to another carrier from that line. They come back together and both genes exist in the same bird, and you pop out a mottled chick. And we see this in a lot of recessive traits.
And so when I had the coachins, I ended up with two solid white birds. And then I got a mottled. And so I went back to the original breeder. And this is where, if you buy from breeders, you're buying their information too. And hopefully you find a good breeder and you can go back to them like I did. And so I went back to him and I said, hey, this is what I'm getting. And we kind of talked about it for a few minutes. And he said, well, 20 years ago, I crossed out to a mottled. And
oh my gosh.
To do something. And he said, I can't remember exactly what his reason was now, but he was trying to accomplish something. And he said, and I've never messed with it again. He said, I don't even have mottled. And he asked if I had ever outcrossed or was it still true to his line. And it was true. I had never outcrossed. And, but I had sibling mated just to see what other recessives were in there. And that's what had brought it out. But he told me a trick. He said, if you look in the armpit when they're getting their adult plumage, there'll be a white feather in their armpit. And that's how you can see the mottled.
there'll be a white feather in their armpit if they're a carrier, but not truly mottled.
I think that's what he said, if memory serves, yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now Gina's going to write that down, and when she goes to feed her birds, she's going to look at all of them's armpits. She's going to find it.
I kept that girl because she had such fantastic type, and she was so sweet anyway, but she looked like she was going gray in the head. She molted that fall, and then when she came back, her head was just like she was an old lady, and she had gray in her hair, but her of course the Cochins had those long, the standard bred Cochins, their feathers on their feet are really, really long, and hers were just bright white. She's a black, and she had gray hair and white toe feathers.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, so she had more after she molted.
Yeah. Yeah, they do get progressively more white. When I started dabbling with the Samani colored genetics, I brought in some speckled Sussex, and that's the only mottled that I have played with. And I only did one generation. Had I done a second generation of the Samani Sussex, my goal was to get a fibromelanistic bird with the mottled markings. And in my journey, I learned that mottled is a huge suppressor of fibromelanosis, and so it would wash out my skin color, and project aborted. I abandoned that one. But they were pretty chick nonetheless. But now Carrie makes me, I wonder if I had opened the wing and if I'd have found a little white feather in the heterozygotes bird.
Yeah. Okay, so so the only real way that a lady could think that she got mottled would be just the pairing was exactly right. And like in my case, 20 years later, it pops up.
Yeah. And so she would do the right thing to go back to the breeder. As a breeder, I would want to know that someone had such a thing. I would want the work to find out who those parents were and probably commence with test breeding the rest of my flock. I'm not aware of any genetic test that identifies the mottled gene. So it would be a whole process if I was really concerned about modeling being in my Ermine to find my carriers. And once I found a carrier, I would use it to test breed each bird against. And if they hatched out a mottled, then, that other bird that I'm pairing the tattletale with is a culprit. But it would be a process to test every bird in the flock.
Yeah. But in the show, okay, if we're just talking about for show, then it really doesn't matter because the show you're just based on phenotype.
Yes. And so we've had this discussion amongst the Samani people too, and the big talks about the recessive locus alleles lately. Yeah, if you're showing, it is a phenotype game. But as a reputable breeder, you have a responsibility to tell people that you are aware of this recessive allele in your birds, what the probability is of hatching such a chick. And, it's kind of a waste of resources to, I don't know. It seems like a waste of resources to go through all the test breeding, but for me, I don't want to worry about these sort of recessives in my birds. And so I want to be clean of them. It's taken me 3 years and place is almost 100% clean of recessive locus alleles. So to those people that know that they have it, I would say just be honest. It doesn't mean that your birds are bad. It's better to be upfront with people and say, hey, you might pop out a striped chick or a mottled chick or a white chick or, something abnormal. If you do, let me know about it. But I just want to know for my own records and, probability tracking.
Well, the more you breed your line, the more you know it. You know what it's going to throw, you know what's going to happen with it, and you know what's there, and you can almost predict what each chick will look like. So if you find somebody like me and you that don't outcross and bring in new, fresh blood or mixed blood or new blood or whatever people call it, yeah, then the line is basically true, and you know what's there. So, like in my Orpingtons, I used to post pictures of the chicks all the time, and I would get flack back for it. So I just keep the Orpingtons for myself at this point. But most of my Orpingtons, when they hatch, have little fringes, little stubs on the outside of their legs.
Oh, yeah.
It falls off by the time they're 2 weeks old. It doesn't sweat me one bit because they don't have stubs when they're adults. But it's almost like baby fuzz on their bottom of their feet when they're hatched. Mm-hmm. But it's all gone by the time they're 2 weeks. But the couple times I posted pictures, people have been like, oh, you got something else that got into your pen, or you've got something going on there. Well, sure, we've got something going on there. There's like 50 billion gene combinations that can be happening in there, But I know it's there, and it doesn't bother me because I know it's going to be gone in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I know my line.
That persist at all?
Do what?
You don't ever have any stubs that persist at all? Mm-mm. That's nice. Yeah, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes, I don't have any problem being honest. Sometimes my Chimani will hatch with those, and they will retain them, and sometimes they will hatch perfectly clean-legged, and by the time they're 6 months old, they have feathers between their toes or 1 or 2 stubs on their shank. There is no rhyme or reason. You cannot predict, when this stuff.
So about, not last year, the year before, so 2024, I went through and I culled every chick that hatched with stubs. If it hatched, it was gone, and I went back to the breeders and got rid of all those breeders. And then last year, I started noticing that I was getting that, but they're not stubs. It's almost like baby fuzz is really the better way to describe it, And so I was like, well, I can't cull. I mean, they all had it, and I couldn't cull every chick. I mean, you can cull yourself out of birds if you're not careful. And so I just let them go. And then when I was moving them out of the brooder, like to the next brooder at 2 weeks, I'm looking at them. I'm like, well, where'd the stubs go? They're all gone. And so then I started like paying more attention. And that's when I realized, okay, now I'm not worried about it. So I went out there, and of course, I've got Orpingtons everywhere. And I just stand there and I was looking, and I don't have any stubs. Now I've brought my skirts down because I like that floofier bottom for myself. But down below the skirt, no, I don't have any stubs anymore.
Yeah. And there are multiple genes, recessive and dominant, that drive the feathers on the shanks. So yeah, it's not like you can go through your flock and pick out the ones that carry it. You're absolutely right. You could cull yourself completely out of a bunch of good birds.
Oh, yeah, you can cull yourself right out of birds altogether. But back to what I was going to make the point with the showing is there are people who only breed for show. So if their birds were, say, getting really tight feathered, they may outcross to, say, a looser feathered bird for next year's shows, just to create something just slightly different to see how it performed with the judges. Because they don't really care about the genetics, the longevity of it. They just care about what's going to happen in the cage, basically.
Is it that they don't really care about the genetics of it, or is it that they don't understand it enough to be able to articulate it to the next person that is interested in buying that bird? It was just something that they did and it worked, and Now they may or may not have some recessives in there. So I've heard the argument before, well, I only breed for show. It doesn't matter. Anything that pops out that I don't want, it's fine. It's fine for you, but if you ever intend to sell, then you're not just an exhibitor, you are a breeder and a seller. And so I think we have a responsibility to the people that we share our birds with to be able to articulate what they may have, what they may be hiding. Because let's be honest, there are people that love to drag breeders through the mud. When something like this happens, you invest, people are considering this an investment. You invest in Ermine Americana from a supposedly reputable breeder, and you hatch something that's a surprise. Well, they didn't get their money's worth. And so now that breeder's name is, could be dragged through the mud.
Yeah.
When you hadn't seen it in 20 years, they didn't. We may or may not know that it was lurking.
Well, he's a very reputable breeder and been around for a long time. But everybody buys birds for a different reason. And when I was showing, even though my show stint was short and I realized that wasn't my thing, there are people who literally just buy birds to show. Like, they don't raise birds. They just buy them to show them. And so there's all kinds of people, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I agree with you. You should be honest. Okay, I didn't breed this bird. So-and-so bred this bird, or I don't know what its genetics are. It just does well in the show ring. Just be honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then there's the flip side, just like this email from this lady. It's very possible and probably highly likely that this breeder had no idea mottled was in her line. Even if she had it and was breeding it true for 20 years, she may still not have known.
Yep.
So,
and I can see somebody thinking that maybe mottled and Ermine were close enough to the same thing. What would happen if I bred to a mottled? Let me try this. Not understanding that genetically they're completely different. And when they hatched nothing but black chicks, they said, well, okay, that didn't work. Let me move on with this black bird.
Yeah, that's why
it's
it's important to find a good breeder if you really want what you want. Try to find a breeder that matches your vision, but know that you're still at a starting point. Your starting point, not a finish point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why every time when somebody asks me, hey, do you know where I could get some good blah? I always tell them, man, you got to go to a show. Go to a show, meet people, check out the breed groups, check out the people inside of it. Some of them going to be honest, some of them ain't. And build a relationship. That's where you can find the best of anything is through relationships.
Mm-hmm. And learning about your breed, learn as much about your breed before you select a breeder that you want to purchase from.
And, I hate to say it, but one of the ones that frustrates me the most is one of the ones that you raise. And that's the I Am Shamani. Like, I could not tell you how many times in one of the groups here in this area, I see exhibition quality I Am Shamani, $200 or whatever, ridiculous price. I'm like, oh, let me see. Bring that picture up. I'm like, broke. And now there's been times that I've said, like, there's been so many people that were buying into it that I posted a picture of an I Am Shamani that I know that you have that is definitely one that could win a show. And I'm like, this is what you're looking for if you want a show quality bird, not that one. and I listed the defaults. You know, on this bird, you should see no white.
Right.
And, you know, like one of the things wrong with that one was it had a red tongue. I'm like, dude, that's so far out of whack. And, you know, the person that I didn't get banned from the group, but I did get blocked. I've been banned from a few, but, you know, people, it really upsets me because that particular bird is like a mystery in itself. And there's so many people that want to get them. And there's people that will just hatch whatever they can and sell it as top of the line. And because top of the line in that bird is not like overly available, it's not there, it's hard, probably one of the highest cull rate birds there is, they don't know any different.
Yeah.
And I get that. And that's why I tell people, before you get a bird, you need to know your goal and you need to know that breed and know the breed standard. Break out your Googler and use it.
Yep. I don't even want to sell to anyone that hasn't educated themselves on the breed already.
Or, you know, they're not passionate about it.
And if you can't spell it, you can't buy it from me.
Oh, no, definitely not. Like, I've had somebody that every 3 or 4 months they'll contact me about my reds. I still don't have any. Man, those things ain't been laying so long. Because I've seen that person's place, and I just really don't feel like they would take care of the birds the way I would want them taken care of. So, I mean, I won't even put a price on it because there's not one.
Well, and this is where we start to get accused of gatekeeping, right? So we hear this word bandied about a lot in the poultry world, especially in the last few years. And
I don't care.
There's kind of a reason for that.
Yeah. No, when we
help anyone that genuinely has an interest in learning my breed and being good stewards of them. I don't sell to anyone who just wants to take my birds and reproduce as many of them as they can and, you know, use my name or my...
And not cull.
Yeah, and not cull and just be able to stand on my laurels. If they want to take my birds and they want to ask for help on what they should cull for, I will spend my time, go to their house, help them cull through, help them understand what I'm looking for. I want them to come to shows. I want them to exhibit alongside me. I want them to beat me. If you take my birds and you show alongside me and you beat me at show,
yeah,
you did a better job raising my birds than I did. You did a better job selecting the birds to bring to show. Your bird was conditioned better, you know, kept in nicer facilities. I challenge anyone. I want people to do that.
I have a buddy of mine that is this guy's a judge, and he also shows birds. And he's like, man, let me tell you what happened at this poultry show. I'm like, what? I'm kind of surprised. I took 12 birds and only 2 or 3 of them placed. I said, really? Because normally most of his birds will place because he's a pretty hardcore color. And he said, but once everybody got put on Champions Row, I got to seeing the people that was there, and the birds did look familiar. And they were my birds. I got beat by my own birds. I said, well, buddy, I mean, just look at it as you winning indirectly. He said, yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
So I look at it from a different standpoint. I don't sell a lot of my Orpingtons, and people who are getting into birds, they hear they want Buff Orpington. They're good layers, they're sweet, and that is all a true statement. But there's a huge size difference between a utility Orpington and what I have. And so I usually just tell people, no, I don't have anything available. First of all, mine aren't fantastic layers because that's not what they were really bred for. But the sheer size of them, you've got to have space. I mean, one of the breeders I've got up there right now, if I pick him up, he is literally like 42 inches from beak to tail. And most people don't have space for that size of a bird. I mean, he's the size of a turkey. And I don't think until people get here and like I still got 2 Orpingtons out there. They're 14 years old and they still lay every day. Yeah, I do. They have curled toes and they're white and they're saucy and their comb falls over. But man, they're out there every day chasing bugs and laying eggs. But they are like shorter and a little bit rounder, and of course they're old, but there's a definite difference. They're harder feather, they're smaller. I mean, these are big birds, and I can't. It's hard to explain that to people. Like, you can't see that in a picture, you know?
Yeah.
And do not understand the difference between exhibition birds and the utility or hatchery grade birds. And that's another reason why I encourage people to come to a show. Just come and look at these birds.
Yeah.
And, just like the people that come here to pick up chicks, and, Orble's running around and they greet everybody and they say, oh my gosh, what is he? And he's a Rhode Island Red. No, I've got Rhode Island Reds, and my Rhode Island Red rooster doesn't look like that. And he's an asshole, by the way. I said, well, that's the difference, and everybody gets educated on Rhode Island. And then they want one, of course, and you have to break it to them that they are not the prolific layers that you got for Tractor Supply. Take 40 million years to start laying, and as soon as it gets 92 degrees, they stop laying. And, yeah, but
if anything remotely stresses them things out, they're going to stop laying. If the sun don't come up on time today, they're like, no, I'm just going to keep this one today.
Yeah. My girls will go broody and they will be serious about it.
And, I've had people, man, I would love one of your Rhode Island Red roosters. I could put those with some of my hens, and they would just have some of the prettiest babies that would lay so much. I'm like, no, I doubt it. Well, yeah, they would, because mine lay really well. They lay a lot. Like, mine don't. It was standard birds for the show aren't, they don't look for eggs in the show box. They look at everything else. So
I have a funny story about somebody who came to pick up some animals. They came and they bought 2 little Nigerian dwarf goats, like new babies, right? And well, they were weaned, so like 8 or 9 weeks. But what is a 8 or 9 week old goat weigh? Like 4 pounds or something. I mean, they're little, right? The size of a cat or something. Well, anyway, so they brought a 36-inch dog cage to put these goats in. And then while they were there, I had also had an ad up for extra coaching cockerels, actually. And we were getting ready to put them in the freezer that day. But this lady who was picking up these goats wanted one of the cockerels. So I was waiting for her to get there so she could pick the one out that she wanted. And we went around the side of the barn, and I said, just tell me which one you want. I had like 6 or 8 of them over there. And her husband was getting the cage ready to put the goat babies in, and I didn't realize that she had a cat carrier in her hand. I was thinking the cat carrier was for the goat, right? They're the size of cats, right? Well, she brought it around to get a chicken, and I didn't think much about it at the moment. And she come around, and all of a sudden she screamed. Well, her husband jumped over the side of the truck and come around to the side, and I'm looking at her like, what in the world? And Yankee is standing there, and Yankee stood about, I don't know, 28, 30 inches tall or so, and those beetle brows and everything. Well, she just thought he was just a monster. And she goes, what am I supposed to do with those? And I was like, hey, lady, you said you wanted one, Well, she decided she wanted one. And so I found her the smallest one. I figured that was the only fair thing to do. I tried to pick her out like the runtiest one. Luckily, the cat carrier opened from the top because she wanted the rooster in the cat carrier.
Oh, she was determined. Oh, no.
We put it in, and I held him down and closed the top of the cat carrier. And then I picked it up and looked at him, and his face was up against the...
What are you doing, Destiny? Put the goat in here. What did I do?
And then they folded the dog cage back down, and they left with goats in their laps and a rooster flattened up against the cat carrier.
Oh, my God. Goats in the cage.
I was like, you've got this backwards. My chickens are bigger than my goats. All right. Well, Gina, it's been nice having you again.
Yep.
Always nice to visit with you guys.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.